Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, to join us today. So, as we discussed before, we enable the recording. So, today's topic is going to be more interesting in terms of the new capability that has been launched by Microsoft in the Dynamic 365 finance world, which is netting. So, before we start the discussion, I would like to call out two key things. So, this session we have divided into two segments. First segment where we will talk about the presentation slide, and the second segment, we will deep dive more on the product area, where we will see the aspect of the netting configuration, netting all end-to-end journey and all. We have picked up one or two scenarios, rather total three scenarios, but let's see how time allows us to do that. But we'll start with the simple, and then we'll reach out to the complex one in the category of hands-on. Whereas in the presentation deck, again, there are two categories that we try to highlight. First, we will start with just checking the pulse of an individual where they are really keen on the aspect of the finance as well as the netting capability and all. Second, I just try to list down the standard scenarios. What if the life begin with netting and without netting, right? So those who are coming from a finance background probably would understand me what I'm trying to highlight. So where I will try to depict the more of the aspect of the accounting entries, how dynamics plays with the accounting entries. And if you enable the netting features, how that dynamically that accounting entry get transformed into and how it helps. Okay. So without much further delay, I'll just try to share my slide. Okay. So as we talked about before we begin, I'll just quickly run through our standard, I would say, housekeeping activities. First of all, if you want to express your viewpoint or if you have any questions, try to use a chat of the MS Teams app. Okay. If you want to talk or if you want to say something about the questions or any doubt, you can raise your hand and we will try to unmute you so that you can speak, and we will try to answer your question. Then, if you have any specific topic which is there in your mind or you want to learn something, it's a learning and it's a sharing session, right? So you can tell us that this is a topic that you want to more understand. We will try to see how we can best fit for a next set of discussion that we plan in a future topic, right? In terms of the agenda today, as I mentioned, I'll just quickly run through at a very high level. We will briefly talk about the netting, why and how. So those who came from a finance background, probably they would understand the capability of the netting and what is netting is all about from a financial perspective. However, those who join from a non-finance background, it will be definitely a good learning for them to understand what is netting. Then we'll talk about the business scenarios with and without netting, right? We just try to depict one of the scenario, which is maybe a very common scenario you would find in our real implementation world, where we'll talk about how the life would be without netting and with netting. Then we'll also talk about the objective of netting, right? That why we want to enable the netting, what are the core objectives of that. Then we'll move on to a live demo. In the live demo, we'll talk about the core setups. Those are required for netting. It's in my view, when I try to learn and implement this capability for one of the implementation that I have learned, the configuration and the master's information, the way it has been designed by Microsoft is slightly different than what we typically do in other account receivable and accounts payable areas. So it's very important to understand how to set up those and what those setups enables you to invoke those netting capability. Then in terms of a couple of features that many organizations out there try to understand, one is the manual netting process. So if you set up something, how you can invoke the manual netting process. There's also automatic process that has been shipped by the product. And many organizations, those who are having the voluminous transactions, that probably they try to learn and they try to go with the automatic feature of the netting. Then you also see one of the common scenarios in any accounting firm, right? The intercompany. So we will also see how the intercompany works with the netting capability and the accounting entry and so on and so forth. At the same time, we will also see a reversal because there might be a chances of the mistakes and how those we can reverse those and how those accounting entries will get reversed, right? So that's how the open discussion towards it, where we will have the Q&A on. But before we begin, we have two questions that set for to all of you. You can open your mobile device and try to scan this slido.com, or you can log into slido.com through your mobile app and enter this ID hash 4 times 1 963. You can say yes or thumbs up once you are done. Then I'll move on to the next question. So this is our first question. Is there any finance background you have?
Rakesh, have you shared your screen?
Yeah, I think my screen is already shared, right?
Oh, no, Rakesh.
You even I cannot see the
I,
scanner.
yeah, now it is visible. Yeah, Rakesh, it's visible now.
Yeah, you can log into slido.com and either you use a QR code or sign in with this number. I can see 8 people join. 63% are saying they knew the finance. They are from a finance background. 38% are saying no. If you are done, I'll move on to the next slide. Shall I move on to next slide? Can someone confirm if they are done with this?
Yes, please, Rakesh.
Okay. Can see Yogendra has raised his hand. So the next question is, do you have any experience with netting? All are done?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So here I can see 92% people are saying they don't have any experience with knitting. Is okay. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide in the interest of time. So in terms of our speaker today, my name is Rakesh and I am a Microsoft MVP as well as a FTRSA from Microsoft in the business application, predominantly on Dynamics 365 ERP. I'm also a group leader of India Dynamics 365 and Power Community Group. So I'll take a pause and I would request Amod to introduce yourself, Amod.
Yeah, hello all. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Yeah, myself Amod Karve. I'm a senior finance consultant, functional consultant in Dynamics. I have been associated with Dynamics since 2007, since Dynamics version X 3.0, and now part of Dynamics journey till it has reached now Dynamics 365. So yeah, I'm glad to be part of this group.
Okay, thank you,
Thanks,
Amod.
Rakesh.
Thank you. So let's move on to the next slide. So as we understood the topic earlier, right? So this is how the scenario that we are going to discuss more in detail. But if you understand, try to imagine that you are working with a USMF legal entity and that has some party, right? Like customer and vendor. And USMF is dealing with purchase and the sales transaction with that party. So we can try to visualize, right? There are few customers and vendors and all, right, in the USMF company. It means that the USMF purchases the services from vendors. The vendor name is the Brightware Marketing and the same vendor name that we are going to continue in our demo as well. At the same time, they are also the customer as well. So it means the same party is playing a dual role, customer as well as a vendor, right? So in this case, USMF would simply have a sales of dollar 1,200 and purchase the worth of dollar 1,500 from Brightware Marketing, right? So the net difference between dollar 300, but obvious, right? Because they want to purchase something from Brightware and they want to sell something to the Brightware. It's a net of basically. It's a dollar 300 between both the transactions. So the idea behind having this netting is instead of both the parties paying full amounts to each other, netting allows them to settle the balances, right? So that's how we've seen action. So in a nutshell, or the essence of netting is what it's efficient process of reducing the complexity of multiple financial transactions between both the parties. So when it comes to the multiple financial transaction, what I'm trying to highlight here, let's understand and double click on this multiple financial transaction, right? So think about a scenario with this same scenario where the customer and vendor, although they are maybe having the same name or same transaction, but try to visualize how Dynamics 365 Finance works as an accounting transactions without netting, right? So we just try to depict the two views. One is the customer transactions and the vendor transaction. All these T account that you try to see, it's try to fill. So when you try to sell something or when you try to invoice something in the customer side, right? So customer balance account is going to be debited and your revenue account is going to be credited, right? That's how the standard Dynamics functionality works without netting. Whereas when you try to, the receive the payment from your customer, but obvious your bank account is going to be debit and your customer balance is going to be created. So what it means is this particular account is going to be nullified now because it's balanced now, settled now. But at the same time, when it comes to the vendor, when you create a vendor invoices, that time your liability is going to be created, your vendor 1,500 is going to be created and 1,500 same is going to be expense account is going to be debited, right? At the same time, when you pay that liability to your vendor, that time your vendor account is going to be debited and your bank account is going to be credited. So that's how the standard mechanism of any kind of a transaction that you pursue in the Dynamics world, whether it's a customer invoicing and the payment or vendor invoicing and the payment that you pay to the vendor, right? But what if you have the netting capability enabled, right? So we just try to depict the view of a netting perspective. So if at all you're a finance consultant and you want to understand the accounting entry, how that works, in a similar case, when you do a customer transactions or customer invoices, that time your customer balance account is going to be debited with the dollar 1,200 as we have seen in the example earlier, and the revenue account is going to be definitely going to be created as a 1,200. But when you perform any kind of a vendor transaction, because here the Brightwave both are playing a role of a customer and vendor, right? We'll see in action. So I don't want to confuse you, but just try to visualize how this accounting entries works. In that case, your vendor account is going to be created because that's how the liability is created, and the your expense is going to be 1500 debited. But if you enable a netting configuration, assuming the fact the configuration of netting is enabled and the netting process is enabled, right? That time it automatically passes the entry to three accounts. One, the account that you're going to newly configure, which is a netting bridging account, where you will see 1,200 is going to be debited, and the other effect is going to be highlighted in the same color, in blue color. So for you guys can understand, which is your customer balance account is going to be created as with a 1,200. At the same time, your vendor balance is also going to be debited, and the netting bridging account is going to be created. Right? That's how the accounting entry gets generated when you do the netting transaction. However, when you try to come to a point to set up how much amount is balanced, whether I need to pay something to my vendor or they need to pay something to a vendor as part of the scenario that we are trying to, or a transaction that we are trying to execute, that time accounting entry is going to be posted in this scenario that uh, I need to pay something to my vendor because 1,200 was on my AR position side and AP, and 1,500 was my AP position side, right? Accounts payable side. So here I need to pay something. That's how the vendor balance account is going to be debited with a $300, and my bank account is going to be credited with a $300, right? So with that, I'll take a pause here and we'll see all these in action. But the idea was to give you a quick glimpse how that accounting entry defines when you have the information recorded with or without netting. Amod, would you like to share your screen?
Yeah. Thanks, Rakesh, for the introduction. Now, let me share my screen. Yeah. Is it visible to everyone?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Okay. So let's get started. So Rakesh has given a brief introduction. So before we deep dive more into the netting capabilities, first let's try to understand how the feature can be activated. So in the feature management, we have option or a feature named by customer and vendor netting. So you need to enable that to have the netting functionality or capabilities in your application. Currently in this demo version, we are on version 10.0.41. So that's the information I wanted to share with you. Okay. Now let's go to the example. So basically we saw two scenarios. One is the non-netting and one is the netting, right? So I have pre-posted some transactions for a couple of customers and vendors, and then we will see the effect of non-netting and netting. So first let me open the vendor which has been defined for this demo purpose. Okay. So first we'll take a look at the scenario of non-netting. So for Global Tech Solution is our vendor against whom we have pre-booked purchase invoice amounting to 1,500 US dollars. Okay, and if you see the vouchers, it will show that the expense account is debit by 1,500 and the payable account is credit by 1,500. Similarly, if you see the vendor balance, that particular vendor will have 1,500 USD as the balance. Okay. Now, with the same name as the netting concept goes, the same party, Global Tech Solution, is our customer as well. So we have that defined or reconfigured in the system. Let's navigate there. Okay, so against this Global Tech Solutions, we have a free text invoice posted already. worth 1200 US dollars. And if you want to see the voucher, it's similar to what was depicted in the PowerPoint. Your revenue account is credited by 1200 USD and your debtor account is debit by 1200. Okay, and if you visualize the vendor balance, sorry, customer balance in this case, it will be 1200 US dollars. Right? Okay. So now imagine, I mean, now that Microsoft has introduced this netting feature or capability, but if there was no feature or capability of netting, then what normally businesses do is they will create a vendor balance, I mean, the vendor payment journal, right? So maybe we are already halfway through the time allotted. So maybe, and I have seen in the poll that most of the people are from finance background, so maybe I will not show them the details how the payment journal is posted, but we will just talk about it. So normally, if netting is not available, what we would be doing is we will be passing a vendor payment journal where we'll be paying the vendor the balance amount of 1500, right? For that, we'll create a payment journal, then we will get it approved through the workflows, then maybe we will have automation with bank, so we'll do all that procedure, and then finally a vendor will get paid 1500. We will need to track the due date of that particular payment, etc., right? So all these procedural administrative things we will need to take care of. Similarly, when the customer is supposed to pay us, right, we will need to again keep a track of when the due date of that invoice is there. Then if he doesn't pay, we need to do a follow-up why he hasn't paid, and then when he pays, ultimately we need to create a customer payment journal manually and then post it and so on, right? So that involves procedural, administrative, technical, and all sorts of delays, right? So those are the things we wanted to highlight in the non-netting world, where netting feature is not available, what organizations will need to do. Okay. Now let's focus on the netting scenario, right? So I have taken another vendor and customer to depict that view. So let me go there. So as we saw in the presentation deck, we have Brightware Technologies as one of the customers. Brightware Technologies marketing, sorry, Brightware Marketing. And again, a similar amount, we have posted a 1200 US dollar free text invoice with the voucher entries as shown to you earlier, where customer account is getting debited and my revenue account is a credit. Right? Similarly, we have a vendor of the same party where we have pre-booked invoice 1500 USD. Okay, so with this simple example, we now know that okay, by manual calculation we know that $300, right? USMF as a legal entity should pay $300 US to Brightwave Marketing, right? So now let's see how netting manages that. Okay, so first I will take you through the configurations and the module in which those netting features are available, and then we'll see first the configurations, and then we'll go on with the process. Okay, so once that feature is active under cash and bank management module, you will see netting as a menu item, and under which all the relevant netting related setups are available. One of the key setups or the initial setups we need for netting is the netting agreements. Okay, so I will just open the screen. Okay, so these are the netting agreement screen where we can define basically the pair between customer and vendor, because for netting to take effect, we need to form a pair between a customer and vendor, right? But there are some prerequisites to define a netting agreement, and what are those? So basically those are two. Here you can see the journal name. So for netting, we need to define a specific journal name. So let me open a duplicate window, one more, to showcase that. And one more thing we need is a netting bridging account. So this bridging account, because as we saw in the presentation, there will be a netting a bridging account will be there, which will be used to balance the entries when customer and vendor account would get settled, right? So now let's see first the journal name. Okay, so we have a journal name. I mean, the place where we normally define the journal name, we can define it there. And so this is the name of the journal, and the type we have is a specific type. It is customer and vendor netting. So that is the journal name we need to define as a first prerequisite. Secondly, we need to define a bridging account in our chart of accounts or main accounts, and that account can be a balance sheet type account, because after all the netting entries are done and everything is posted, the checkpoint is that that particular bridging account will have zero balance, right? So we have a netting bridging account. Okay. That is our type balance sheet, and these should be configured then in the netting agreement, which we will configure. Okay, so these are bare minimum two prerequisites to get started with the netting agreement. Okay, so now we know that for Brightwave marketing we have to do netting. So now let's try to create a netting agreement first. So we click on new from this menu item, and okay, another thing before we move ahead, this netting agreement has a feature, or for multiple pairs of customers and vendors, we can create a single netting agreement, as well as for a single pair of customer and vendor, we can create a single netting agreement. So that way we can also configure our system depending on how business thinks about it, right? So I will just create, in this case, for our demo purpose, single agreement for a single pair. Okay, we will create, or rather we will select the same journal which is already created, netting, and we will attach the bridging account, which is specifically designed for this purpose. Okay, and then here we will add lines. Okay, here I will select the customer account, that is Brightwave marketing. Okay, then I will select the vendor account, Brightwave marketing. Okay, and then I will put a start date and end date. So basically, purpose of this is from which date the netting pair started to be in operation, right? So for example, if we select the date from 1st of July to 31st of December, so that indicates to system that okay, for these 6 months, these two parties are a pair of customer and vendor and should be considered for netting. So all the transactions which will be posted during these 6 months will be considered for netting, or rather in scope of netting feature or functionality for that purpose. Okay, once the date and all parameters are filled in, then we need to activate this netting agreement. Okay. So let us activate. Okay, so now this netting agreement is active for a Brightwave marketing, and we are good to now go with the next steps. Now, if you can see here, if there is any correction to be done, we have a deactivate button to suppose we have selected a wrong customer or wrong vendor for pairing, or any wrong dates, we can deactivate and modify the netting agreement accordingly. Okay, now so all this, with all this setup is done, now let's navigate to netting overview button. So this netting overview button basically gives you a summary of all the transactions which are posted in the period from 1st July to 31st of December. This is a fresh customer and vendor, so we have just one transaction each posted for demo purpose. So you will see here that open customer invoice totaling to 1200 USD and open vendor invoice totaling to 1500 USD. So that summary, the feature will this particular screen will give you. Another important point to highlight here, that you might see field currency here. So customer vendor transactions can happen in multiple currencies for a legal entity, right? So there can be transactions in euro, Indian rupees, or any other currency, GBP, right? So However, netting has a concept that for a single currency, the netting can be done, right? So if we have multiple invoices in multiple currencies, then based on currencies, the system will split the invoices into multiple lines. So you will see here a line for USD, then maybe for GBP, if there are any transactions in GBP, and so on. Okay, so with this now this is just the information. Now let's start with the netting process. So here we have the button of create netting. So I will push that. Okay, and one more thing. So as we spoke about, there are two ways in which netting can be done. One is the manual way and one is the automatic way. So here we are firstly focusing on the manual way. Okay, so yeah, once I push the button create netting, you will see again the two windows where we can see the open customer invoices which are in scope of netting. So currently we have only one, and open vendor invoices which are in scope of netting, right? So that kind of information will be displayed, and then you can decide which open customer invoice and vendor invoice you want to do a netting for. Okay. Similarly, at the bottom of the screen, you can see a short summary or total. So here it is showing to us that customer balance after netting will be 1200 and the vendor balance is 1500. Okay, so we will see the impact after we actually post the netting. Now, how to do it is very simple. So you need to mark the invoice which is to be considered for netting and click on mark selected. Okay, so this is marked for netting. Similarly, we'll select a single vendor invoice, click on mark selected. So it's marked for netting. Okay. Also, you need to post you need to select the date when netting is supposed to be posted. Let's take today's date, right? 26th October. And then here we have a feature of printing of the netting advice, right? So I will just post the netting first, and then we'll see what that particular report showcases. So once the netting posting date is filled in, this post button will be active and I can post the netting. So let's post it. Okay, so netting is posted, number of vouchers post to the journal article. Okay, so now if you observe in the below section, open customer invoices. Now there are no more open customer invoices because in the example or use case we took 1200 USD was our customer open invoice and 1500 USD was our vendor open invoice. So by going by the netting principle or fundamental, minimum of the two amounts, right? 1200 will be my netting amount. So that will be considered as my netting amount when the transaction is posted. So based on that, open customer invoices are nothing now because that 1200 netting amount would have settled that particular invoice, and now 300 remains balance. So against the particular vendor. So that can be seen in this screen. Why I'm explaining this to you now, because this is the demo purpose. We are just entering one transaction, but for that particular customer vendor will keep on happening the transactions. And suppose we are doing a netting in this particular month, next month we will receive multiple customer vendor invoices, etc. So whatever invoice is balanced, or suppose organization decides not to pay this particular open vendor invoice, the next vendor invoices will get added in this particular screen for next netting cycle. So that is what I wanted to showcase. And now let's quickly move to the impact it has on particular vendors. So let me refresh my screen. Okay, so now you might have seen this is our first entry where invoice has been booked, and this second entry has been automatically booked by system based on the netting journals. So now we'll see the voucher. So as we saw in the presentation deck, the accounts payable, or rather my vendor account got debited by 1200 USD and my bridging account has a credit by 1200 USD. Okay. What the impact of that is, if I come back, 1500 was my initial invoice amount, 1200 got settled, and now I have 300 USD as a balance to be paid to that particular vendor based on due date or based on the organization policy, right? Then similarly, let's go to our customer, what has happened there. Okay, Brightwave marketing. If we go now into transactions, right? 1200 against which 1200 netting entry you can see here. The voucher will be exactly same, of course, with the reverse effect, where accounts receivable account will get a credit and bridging account will have a debit. So bridging account 1200 will have a zero balance at the end. And of course, for this customer, there will be no balance because this is already settled, right? It has a balance zero in this balance column. Okay. So in this way, we can have a manual netting posted in the system. So of course, we will see objectives at the end, but one of the benefits is the transactions between parties can be avoided and corresponding delays, procedural things, administrative things can be avoided. So that is one benefit, direct benefit to any particular organization. Okay, so I hope, yeah, one thing I need to showcase is the netting advice, right? Is that? So let's go there. So, okay, now the netting is posted. Now we will again go back to netting agreement from the main menu path, so we'll understand. Under netting agreements, Brightwave was our netting agreement. We will go again, navigate to netting overview. Okay, again, now if you see open customer invoice is 0, open vendor invoice is minus 300, so 300 still is payable. Okay, then we see a button here, netting history. Okay, so in netting history, okay, again it will show case what actually system has done, right? So it considered one example. So content invoice count comes here. So one invoice of a customer and one invoice of a vendor was considered for this particular netting. Total invoice amount of a customer was 1200. Total invoice amount of a vendor was 1500. Okay, so that kind of information is visible in this particular screen. There are two more buttons which we'll see now. One is open details. So in open details, again, it shows the invoice number of a free text invoice which are in scope of this netting. So business can keep a track of what has happened. It also shows you what was my invoice amount and what was my netting amount. Netting amount we all understand is 1200, and what was my invoice amount? So 1500 in case of a vendor, and only 1200 got netted. That's why we have a balance of 300 USD. Now let's see, okay, here also, as well as I think in the screen before, we have print netting advice option. So print netting advice is basically kind of a report or a summary which can be shared internally with other departments as well as with our party, which is our customer or vendor, to showcase what is considered for netting. So, okay, so this is a pretty standard Microsoft report kind of thing, where it shows you what was my customer account number, what was my vendor account number, what was the customer name, date of netting, so when it got posted, and then other details which are not filled in for this demo customer purpose. And then the customer transactions, what was the transaction date, due date, voucher, then other details like what currency it was, what was settled and what is remaining. So netting amount was 1200. That message goes to your counterpart or your party that okay, netting amount was 1200, and the summary is remaining balance in case of a customer is 0, and 300 is the remaining balance in case of a vendor. So your vendor understands that okay, 300 USD will be paid by USMF to the particular vendor. Okay, so this report also gives a flexibility and kind of a transparency to showcase to your customer vendor that okay, how much entries has been posted as a part of netting by USMF organization, and what is now the status. If I'm supposed to get some money from USMF or I need to pay some money in USMF. So that means what? If we have a balance here somewhere, right, where some 200 USD is supposed to be remaining balance, then 200 USD is supposed to be paid by Brightwave marketing to USMF. So in that way, it gives a full information, a complete picture of what information is already posted in the system. Okay, so I believe that completes manual netting part. Now let's quickly go to automatic netting. So if we talk about automatic
Amod,
netting,
sorry to cut you short. Before we move on to automatic netting, is
yeah.
there any question?
Yeah, I had one question. How does the cash discount work in this scenario? Because there could be, balances in today, but based on, the discount, cash discount, the balance could change, right? Of when you pay or when you want to pay, of both
Mm.
sides. So, is that considered here?
To my knowledge, currently cash discount is not considered, but one aspect which we have not configured for this demo purpose was tax. So tax is definitely considered, but not cash discount, up to my knowledge right now.
Thank you.
Amod, what
Yeah.
happens if the receivable and payable are different currency? So the differential amount, where does it get posted?
Okay. So
Conversion, just like a translation amount.
yeah. So I think it's Prasad. So the let me take you back to netting overview screen. Okay, so this is agreement, right? Then in netting overview, as I was trying to explain earlier, if we have multiple see line per currency here. So one customer invoice in euro and one customer vendor invoice in euro. So we will have a different line. And for every currency, you need to execute netting differently. So there is no cross currency netting available or applicable here. Does it answer your question?
So which means the customer and the vendor transactions have to be into the same currency.
Yes, for netting purpose, yes. So
Okay.
only those
Okay.
invoices will be considered which are in same currency. There can be instances, right, where one invoice is in euro, but the for vendor you
Yeah.
are invoicing in euro, but other in USD. But for netting, uh, currency-wise netting happens. To summarize it. Okay.
And suppose,
Hi, Amod.
Amod, one more question here. Sorry. Now, suppose my this currency, that is the transaction currency, right?
Yeah.
And then what if they are both booked at different exchange rates? My home currency is say INR, and this one was at $45 to 45 rupees to a dollar, and another was booked at $50.
Hmm.
So that exchange rate, how does the system take care of it?
No. So
Difference.
okay. So netting by principle happens only on transaction currency amount, and whatever is your residual, right? So when you will ultimately pay to your vendor, depending on if
Mhm.
it's payable or receivable. In that case, when you pay that, the system will calculate the exchange gain or loss at that particular time. But yeah, coming back a step, okay, if the transaction currency is USD and your accounting currency is Euro, then you saw a settlement entry right here. So in my
Mhm.
transaction, what is it? Yeah. Okay, so this example we are taking in this netting settlement entry got posted, right? So if the scenario is that your company currency is euro, then additional entry will be here, like we do for normal settlement when there is a settlement happens, realized exchange gain and loss is calculated. Similar entry or similar entry line will get populated here.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So it
Fair
works
enough.
exactly like a normal settlement with the
Okay. Fair
netting.
enough. Thanks, Amod. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Someone more had a question.
Yeah, the bridging account where we mentioned in the parameter or
Yeah, it is in the netting agreement. So
Okay, the agreement wise, we can give the main account, right?
Yeah, agreement
For the
wise, we will define a bridging account as well as we can
Is that just me or did the screen and audio go?
Yes,
No, it's me
yeah,
as
it's
well.
Amol,
all
I
It's me
over.
as
guess
well.
there is a issue
Amod,
at Amol end.
yeah, 2 flags. Please rejoin me. Just give us a minute.
hello. Am I audible now?
Yeah, you're audible
Yes,
now.
Yep.
yes.
Yes.
Okay. Apologies, some glitch. Okay, let me share my screen. I heard the last question about bridging account to be configured in netting, but I don't know whether you could hear my answer. So I've shared my screen again. Is it visible?
Yep.
Yeah, yes,
Yes.
please.
Okay, so for netting agreement, when we are defining netting agreement, the bridging account needs to be defined. And what I was saying, it can be different for a different netting agreement, or it can be same as well, because we can have multiple pairs of customers, vendors in the same netting agreement. So
Okay.
that's the
Was
okay.
yes.
Okay, so now quickly look at the configurations for automatic netting. So let me navigate to cash and bank management, where we have basically two types of uh, setups to be done, or rather netting rules to be defined for automatic netting. So we have two menu items, netting rules and automatic netting. So let's see netting rules first. Okay, so in netting rules, basically we can define which rule to be followed. Okay, so we'll define one rule to showcase how many options we have here. So okay, this is just the rule name. And then for netting sequence, we have four types of options here. So by due date, newest to oldest, by due date, oldest to newest, by invoice balance from largest to smallest, and by invoice balance, smallest to largest. So these are the four options given. So as we saw in the first use case, we manually picked the invoices to be netted, right? But for one or two invoices, it's possible. But if the transaction is huge, volume is large, then some sort of automation is required. So in this particular way, or in these particular four criteria which are provided out of the box, we can do some sort of a automation. So we'll just see one example. So I will choose by due date from newest to oldest, right? Then which netting agreement to be selected for this? You can select all netting agreements if you select the option all. If you keep the option as selected, then of course it gives you option to select which netting agreements this particular rule should apply to. So for now, I will just select the option as selected. Then it will ask you next question, include credit note and debit note, yes or no. So you can choose yes or no as per your policy. Okay, then here, okay, then you have to save it. Okay, and then add the netting agreements which you want to use in this case, right? So then you can go on to add the netting agreements which you want to be part of this particular netting rule. Okay. So we will come to this in a minute. Okay. Before that, for automation use case, we created one example. So let me showcase that. And then we'll see. Okay, so for this automatic netting, we have posted a vendor invoice amounting to $400 US, right? And similarly, we will see one more example of a customer. Okay, same party is my customer, and I have two free text invoices posted, one amounting to 300 USD and the other amounting to 700 USD. And I think I missed to include the due date here. So we are checking, or rather, we are exploring the option to do the auto netting by due date. So let me add that option. Okay. So we have due date 7th of October and 15th of October. Now, as per our setup netting rule, we will be choosing newest to oldest, right? So that means what? 15th October should be considered first, and 7th October should be considered the next in the sequence when we are supposed to pose a netting. Okay. Okay. So with these basic transactions now, we will define the netting agreement for this particular pair of customers and vendors. Okay, then we will add the customer and vendor details. Then start date and end date. And the last step, we will activate it. We'll save and activate the same. Okay, so now in netting overview, you will see the summary of all the transactions which are selected, and then create netting. Okay, you will see there are two customer invoices which are open and one vendor invoice which is open, right? But you don't want to select it manually. So now we will go on to choose the netting rule. So this header we already defined. Now let's choose the netting agreement which we activated for vertex. Right? Okay, save it and activate it. Okay, so now for vertex netting agreement and netting rule, there is a pair using this netting rule. Now let's go to menu of automatic netting. So in automatic netting, we have this parameter window where we can choose the netting rule, which we have just defined vertex, right? Then we can choose a netting posting date, 26th October, today's date. Invoice due date, we need not choose in this case because we have given a sequence to system, okay, and then review before posting. So it will give you some sort of a idea as what is getting considered. And then click on OK. Okay, so once you click OK, it will give you the, of course, the summary of what system is trying to settle. So we had 700 and 300 as the customer invoices, and 400 was our vendor invoice. So the total of customer invoices outstanding was 1000 and vendor invoices outstanding was 400. So among the two, which is the lowest? Okay, that is my netting amount. So 400 is my netting amount, which is considered by system, right? So we had only one vendor invoice. So if you click on view details, it will showcase, okay, that particular vendor invoice number will be netted off when the netting is posted. And in case of customer view details, it will show you, okay, there are two invoices, right, which were posted, but due date of the invoice 700 USD was 15th October. So based on our netting rule criteria, it should be considered first, right? So that is considered first, and from that particular invoice, this 400 amount would be netted. So that preview you can have using this particular capability. And once you're happy with whatever selection is done is good, then you can post it. So you avoid clicking that create netting, avoid manually selecting each and every invoice, and then see the result at the end. So number of vouchers are posted. So let's go to vendor transaction for Vertex. Okay, now vendor has a zero balance because we had only one invoice posted against a vendor, and that is done and dusted. So that's gone. And now let us try to see the customer impact on customer Vertex. Okay, so let's navigate to transactions. Yeah, so out of two invoices, 700 invoice is showing now a balance of 300 because 400 got adjusted against this. This has the latest due date, 15th of October. This is the posting date, but due date we had 15th of October. And $300 invoice is completely open because that will be considered in the next netting cycle or when we have some more transactions to be netted. Okay. So in this way, automation of netting using those four criteria by due date and by invoice amount are possible, starting from newest to oldest, oldest to newest, or based on amount chronology, highest to lowest, lowest to highest. So this feature allows some automation rather than spending time manually on it. Okay, yeah. So this covers basically the second topic. I mean the second method of netting, which is automatic netting. We have overrun the time. We have one more scenario to cover for intercompany. So should we go for it?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, for intercompany, I've taken a very simple example. Intercompany topic is a complex, but yeah, we'll just do a very small example for that. So for that, we have defined a vendor and a customer. So okay, so we'll be using DMF as our intercompany partner or client, right? So DMF V26 is my vendor in my USMF company. Okay, and let me open a duplicate tab and switch to DMF. Okay. Let me switch to DMF. Okay. Here we have a customer defined as USMF. Okay. Just for understanding sake, we kept names like that. Okay, so USMF C26. So against this, we have pre-posted a pretext invoice amounting to 7,000 USD. Okay, of course, DMF has a different currency, so that's why you can see the different amount there. And in vendors transactions in USMF, we have 7,000. So we have purchased 7,000 worth goods from DMF, and DMF has sold 7,000 USD amount to USMF. That is the scenario. Okay. Okay. So with this simplistic scenario, let's see how netting behaves. So as of now, we need to define the netting agreement. I'm defining netting agreements as we speak, so we are not confused. So intercompany 2610. Okay, use the same journal name, same bridging account. Okay, and we will add the. Okay, now the difference how we define the netting is, if here you can see the first column, it tells us to select the legal entity, right? So we are currently in USMF, and USMF is the entity which is going to do netting. I mean execute the netting process. Okay, so here we will select the the customer is in DMF, so we'll select here customer from DMF. Okay, so customer account from DMF is what we defined. USMF C26, and we have a vendor in USMF, so we'll pair that with DMF. Okay, and push the start and end date. Okay, save and activate. Okay, so we have create a pair from customer legal entity was DMF and vendor legal entity USMF. So we have created a pair. Now if you click on netting overview, it will showcase you 7,000 is my open customer invoice, right, in both sides. I mean, we didn't take different amount just to see accounting effect of it. So amounts are same. Now we'll go for manual netting in this case. Okay, here you can see which company has which transaction is showcased here. So customer legal entity is DMF, and those open customer invoices from that legal entity will be visible in this section of the screen. And vendor legal entity is USMF. So vendor transactions which are posted in our legal entity are showcased here. So process is same. We will select the open customer invoice, market, customer and market. Okay, and then we'll put the netting posting date 26th and post it. So now, of course, because we took the same amounts, now you'll see from USMF you see that everything is settled because amount was same, right? So now we'll see the transaction wise what happened. This is a different vendor. So let us select the vendor DMF 26 transactions, right? So here you can see the netting voucher which got posted and 7,000 got settled. Now nothing is balanced to be paid. Okay, and there's a similar kind of voucher which we saw in the initial example, right? And in case of customer, I'm in DMF. So in case of customer, okay, we will have the netting posting something like this, and it will showcase a voucher, right? Accounts receivable credit and intercompany, so whatever account we defined as a from the posting profile will be picked up here. Okay, so in this way, intercompany transactions work. So this is a basic setup which we did for intercompany. Of course, there will be complications in intercompany with respect to exchange rates, which Prasad mentioned. Then, of course, this is a very basic scenario, but there can be scenarios where we have multiple vendor invoices, multiple customer invoices against each other, and then the complexity will grow. But the system will behave fundamentally in the same way, where it will in the legal entity in where we are actually doing the netting process, it will settle the bridging account, and in the other company, right, it will correspondingly the other legal entity, when they do the netting process, the bridging account will get matched or equal. So that is the concept of intercompany, which we try to showcase at a very basic example. Okay, and now I believe I said there is only one topic remaining, but let's quickly do a reversal with the initial netting which we posted. Okay, so I will navigate again to netting agreements. Okay, we will pick this one, Bright Wave, right? Go to netting overview, okay, and go to netting history. You have these two transactions already posted, right? We haven't done anything more on this, and then there is an option here, reverse netting. So we'll select this from netting history, use existing dates for reversal. You can say yes or no, or if anything different, then we can put a different date in the below window, and then say reverse. Okay, so number of outlets posted are 2, and transaction is reversed. Now quickly navigate to Bright Wave and see what happened. So we are in Bright Wave. Now we go to transactions. Okay, now you will notice that, okay, the initial transaction which we posted, which left us with a balance of 300 only, right? Now that in the initial invoice, you will see that balance is now restored to 1500 because we reversed the netting, and here the reversal entry is posted. Okay, and the voucher for same is again, it's the exact contra entry of the initial entry which got posted when we did the netting. So this kind of entry will get posted, and similar effect we will have on the customer. So if we navigate to customers, go to Bright Wave again. Now you'll see open balance in that particular customer restored to 1200 because the netting entry got reversed. So as we were mentioning earlier, netting entries got reversed because of that option, and why we need it if there are any mistakes done while posting the initial netting. Okay, so we overshoot by some time, but yeah, that basically concludes what we wanted to showcase, the use cases we wanted to cover. So over to you, Rakesh.
Yeah, thanks, Amod. Any questions so far before we conclude or wind up for today?
Just one question from me is about the netting journal. Do we need to have multiple journals, or is one sufficient for most of the scenarios? Is there any best practice or any specific scenario? Can you just touch upon that?
You're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, best practice, to be honest, it's a new feature. So what best practice, it's still getting evolved. But if you ask my personal opinion, right, I would believe only single netting agreement journal as well as bridging account would suffice the purpose. Of course, there can be scenarios where that is not required or that's not correct, but those can be looked at differently.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? It looks like there are no questions. Okay, so I think if there are no questions, we will take a pause now. Thank you very much, Amod, for your time, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you. See you in the next session then. Thanks.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks all. Thank you all.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye. Cheers.
So